There we go. All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kurt Karnatz with ESD and president of the Chicago CoreNet chapter. I want to welcome and thank you all for joining us here today for our very special program and panelists who will be discussing our program that's riffing on David Bowie, Cha-Cha Changes. Before we get started, we do have a couple of housekeeping and announcements that I want to go through here. So as you all know, we're on Zoom, and the way that we're going to run the program today is that if you have any questions or comments, please do submit them in the comment section, and we'll save time at the end for our panelists to address the questions and comments. During the program, you will be muted, and so please do submit any questions via that vehicle. We do have some really exciting upcoming events. I'm really excited as we're hoping we're starting to return back to norm, and we have several events for January planned. But before that, I do want to point out that if you're not aware, the Real Awards, our committee who sponsors the Real Awards has been hard at work, and our nominations are now open. So please, I do encourage you to go to the website to check out the different categories. We are intending to feature and highlight some of the great work that's been done and great people over the past 2 years with our next Real Awards event. We do have a live event coming up at Maggiano's on January 11th. We'll be featuring Spencer Levy, who's with CBRE, and he's their Global Chief Client Officer and Senior Economic Advisor. He'll be kicking off the year for us, as he has in the past, with an economic forecast. And so hopefully you'll all be able to join us for this in-person event. Great information as well, a great networking opportunity. And then the end of the month, we've got a meet and greet that's welcome to all, that's being hosted by our chapter young leaders. And so I do encourage you, if you're available and interested, to please attend that event for the networking and camaraderie. Before I close on the events, I do want to mention that last week was the Global Summit that was held in Seattle, and it was a great event, and I know a lot of us had challenges or inability to get there, but what I'm particularly excited about is in 2022, Chicago will be hosting the Global Summit. So several thousand people in our space industry will be converging in Chicago, and I can't emphasize enough how great of a time it would be to be a member of CoreNet as well as a sponsor of CoreNet for 2022. Without our sponsors, we would not exist. We would not be here today. And so I want to just special shout out to our end user group, our platinum group, our gold sponsors, and our supporting sponsors, our silver sponsors. Without them, we would not be here. And so really appreciate that. And just want to give one more plug to the Global Summit next year here being in Chicago. Be a great opportunity for us to really showcase the city and network with the global community. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Heather, who will introduce the panel and session.
Thanks, Kurt. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Good. Hi, my name is Heather Turner-Loth. I'm with Epstein Architects. So just want to give a nod to Carrie Ehrlich and Lauren Bagel. This program was being programmed prior to the pandemic. And so we had to pivot when things started to shut down. So we're super excited to bring this discussion back to you. Everyone, maybe turn on mute if you wouldn't mind. Some background noise. So when we think about what's going on in the marketplace, there's definitely a lot of movement. Obviously, we're seeing the headlines of the Great Resignation, but today we're really going to dive into those transitions that our panelists have made from service provider side of real estate to end user or vice versa. And they're going to share with us their experiences, their blind spots, and their successes. In our prep session, we had a ton of fun. We had some great laughs together. So I think you guys are all in for a fun and insightful conversation. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn over the program to Hannah Chow. She's Real Estate Facilities Management and Workplace Program Manager with Mondelez, and she's going to be our moderator today. So take it away, Hannah.
Awesome. Good afternoon, everyone. Nice to meet some of you. Nice to see some of you again. As Heather mentioned, I am a real estate program manager for Mondelez. I lead our North America design and construction projects. I too share a career path suggested by the title of this panel. I started my career as a young architect, worked my way through, went to the owner's rep side, And then finally, I'm on the quote unquote other side of my perspective. So here with me, I have 4 amazing panelists. We have Ben, Bill, Brittanie, and Carrie. I'm going to ask them to give their own introduction, tell us about their career journey, recent changes, and the motivation to make the change. So maybe Ben, you can start us.
Happy to do it. So hi, everybody, and thanks for joining in. My name is Benjamin Bader. I am the global head of real estate at Here Technologies. I've been at Here about 4.5 years. And for those of you not familiar with us, we used to be Navtech, which was a Chicago-based company. Then we were bought by Nokia, I think back in 2008, and we're part of Nokia until 2015. And now we're owned by a very sort of interesting consortium of Audi, Mercedes, BMW, Intel, Pine Oak, Continental, Bosch, and Mitsubishi. How they agree on anything, I don't know, but they agree that we're worth owning and we're awesome. But before I was at Here, I spent almost 20 years at JLL on the provider side. And I'm not sure my journey to real estate was typical. I'm not sure there is such a thing as a typical journey into real estate. I honestly never thought about real estate a day in my life. I used to live and work overseas, moved to Chicago for graduate school, and was very focused on management consulting, was going to go work back in China, and actually had some offers from consulting firms to work back in China. And one day got a phone call from somebody at LaSalle Partners, which of course is the predecessor to JLL, and said, "Hey, we saw your resume. Do you want to talk?" And I said, "Sure," because my mama taught me right that if someone wants to talk to you, you should talk with them. And 25 years later, I've been in real estate the entire time and had amazing opportunities, met a lot of great people, even relocated within JLL for 4 years to Philadelphia, which we can talk about if there's time. And really excited that I joined real estate and glad I had a career in it, but it happened to me. I didn't happen to it. I'm not sure if people wake up in the morning when they're little kids saying, "I wish I worked in real estate," but that's now how it worked out, but it worked out great.
Bill, would you like to go next?
Absolutely. Bill Fedun. I am Director of Facilities and Workplace Experience at CUNA Mutual Group in Madison, Wisconsin. Been at the company about 3 years now, but before that, I was an architect at several design firms in Wisconsin and California. I had thought about coming over to the client side previously in my career. I was working for a firm in San Francisco and helping on the Facebook campus, their first iteration, not where they are now. And as that project was wrapping up, Facebook had asked me to come internal with them. And it's something that I thought about for a day or so, but I was living in San Francisco proper and didn't want to commute to Menlo Park every day. That sounded like a nightmare. So I passed on the opportunity, but it's something that had always kind of been in the back of my mind. And so when a recruiter for CUNA Mutual reached out to me, just like Ben, I kind of jumped at the chance to at least have the conversation, and it led me to where I am today.
Brittanie?
Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be here. So I'm Brittanie Campbell-Turner. I am the manager over construction over at American Family Insurance. I am based in Madison, Wisconsin as well, but I hail from Chicago and have been working in owner's representative construction project management since 2009. So pretty much owner's rep work from that duration up until I've come over to American Family about 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago now. What's interesting about my journey is I also have a content creation aspect to what I do. So because of that, I'm going to take a quick picture of all of us because that's what we have to do in true content creation fashion. So hey everyone. I have a podcast just to share with you what kind of content I do create. The name of the podcast is called Constructor, constructor.com if you are interested. But I've been creating content specifically around how to support owners, clients who are embarking on construction projects, how to improve relationships, how to really use contracts in order to do that, but also how to all the things that we support through consultation, right? Build smarter, build faster, build within budget, just do things smarter and really with a lean mindset. So that actually put me on an interesting journey to meet a lot of people and have lots of interesting conversations. So I started that in 2016 and created a ton of content around apparently what American Family was looking for. Because someone reached out to me, my now director reached out to me on LinkedIn and let me know that he had been listening to my podcast. And it really shocked me. There's actually maybe 2 other people, at least on the call, that work with me now that had a listen prior to me being interviewed. And I wasn't looking at all to shift from owner's representation. But when I heard a little bit more about what the company really represents and what they wanted to embark on, particularly around sustainability and lean, I said I had to jump at the opportunity because I found that a lot of the values aligned with what I wanted to do and what I wasn't actually doing at the time. So that's what brought me to where I am today.
Great, thank you. Last but absolutely not least, Carrie.
Hi, everyone. It's great to see so many familiar faces today on the call. I'm at CBRE. I'm a managing director in our sales and client solutions team for global workplace solutions. So that's the division that focuses on outsourcing solutions for Fortune 500 companies. And as Heather mentioned at the beginning, this topic came up shortly thereafter after I had changed and joined CBRE a couple years ago. So I'm excited that we circled back with this topic, but it kind of came from my background is more on the end user side, and I made the shift to the service provider side when I came over to CB about 4 years ago. And, you know, change has been something consistent throughout my career. As I was just kind of thinking through talking today, my background is industrial engineering. So similar to what was said before, no one ever sets out and says, I want to be in commercial real estate or especially corporate real estate, right? It's one of those things that you just kind of happen into. And I think that's one of the fun topics that as Coronet, as a industry group, we get to tackle. But from an industrial engineering perspective, it's all about change and making things better and creating processes and efficiencies. And so I've tried to do that with whatever role I have. I was at United Airlines as an industrial engineer when I made the change into commercial real estate. And I was doing my MBA at the time in finance and real estate. And I thought, how am I going to get from engineering into real estate? I decided that was the area I wanted to go into. And I had the opportunity to be part of when United moved the headquarters from the suburbs down to downtown Chicago. So many of you remember that project. That was my baptism into real estate. I joined Coronet thanks to Meg Osmond, who is our architect and former Coronet president. And she said, hey, you got to come to Coronet because you'll learn. And, you know, those 14 years, I can't believe it. I actually totaled it up today. There are still people today that I met on my very first luncheon that I attended all those years ago. And so that just really goes to show, like, you'll hear me plug Coronet a lot today because it's really meant a lot to me in my career. While I was at United, I also did Latin American design and construction. I have a background in Spanish and international studies. And so that fit in really nicely with that. It was the best winters of my Chicago living when I would go to South America to support those projects. And then I got a call from a fellow Coronet member, John Wickman, who said, hey, there's a chapter president that I know that they're looking for an experienced real estate person for Capital One. And I thought of you. And I'm like, well, you know, I'm not really looking for a job, but similar to, I think what Ben had said, you never turn down the opportunity to have a conversation. So had a conversation and realized, you know, Capital One represented a completely different type of real estate that an airline just will never be. And so I joined Capital One and built out a team in Chicago that we focused on the Midwest and West. I noticed Hannah French on the call. So Hannah and I did a lot of construction projects all over, some really exciting things. Had just a blast being there, and it was absolutely wonderful. Then another Coronet intersection happened actually at the last Seattle Summit 4 years ago. In course of conversation, met someone from CBRE, and they started recruiting me and said, hey, you've got the background that we're looking for on this side of the house. And so I'm like, but I'm not a salesperson. I've never done that. But the experience that I've had as an end user has been really helpful as I have made the transition over to the service provider side. And so that's been kind of my journey to get me this far today. So thanks for having me on the panel.
All right, well, thank you, everyone. So now we're going to jump into the fun part. So we'll start with, well, maybe I think this might be a good question for Ben to start us off with. So when you made that change to here from 20 years at JLL, what did your day one look like?
Well, besides sort of, first day of school jitters, right? They're going to like me. What should I wear? All that stuff. I over the 20 years I was at JLL, I did a lot of different things, but I primarily grew up in the transaction space. And then as I got a little bit more senior, moved into account management. So a lot of what I was doing was taking care of people just like me as best I could, understanding their business, really diving into it and owning a relationship, for the betterment of their business. And so, what I do today is not dramatically different than what I did, for most of my career at JLL. I'm still taking care of clients. They're just now internal clients instead of external clients. There is a level of intimacy that I probably have now because I'm in-house that I couldn't get as a partner, despite trying as best I could. But my actual job in terms of using data, in terms of driving towards the right decisions and making the right recommendations is not dramatically different. So I think, fortunately, my background, even on the provider side, prepared me very well for day one, on the end user side. But of course, it's all the normal stuff, right? It's trying to get, build, and understand relationships, understand politics and dynamics, as much information as I can gather on the portfolio, on the team, on what we're trying to do. We're a global company. We're in 50 countries around the world. So there's an international aspect of this as well. And I was fortunate to have done a lot of international work at JLL. So I think that was all prepared, but it's like everything else. You just got to get in there, roll up your sleeves, do your best from an expectation management standpoint, right? I'm not going to solve it all today, maybe not tomorrow, but we are going to take it bit by bit. We're going to use data. We're going to make smart decisions and make good recommendations. And ultimately, that's the kind of stuff that wins the day.
Well, speaking of politics, I think, Bill, you have shared a good story about maybe being privy to potential politics in an interview when you were interviewing the current company. Can you tell us a little bit more about your first day then?
Absolutely. Yeah. Before my first day, even just during my interview phase, I was asked, how do you deal with internal politics? And the fact that that was a question during the interview, I knew I was sort of in for it. But that was great. I mean, I knew to expect that then moving forward, and I knew how I was potentially going to handle that moving into the organization. And I think as all of us look at how we made that transition, I think one of the important things to note is we're bringing an outside perspective, and it's always great to hire someone from inside your company, but we've all brought that outside perspective. And so just in the same realm with that internal politics, I was able to bring that outside perspective and be like, well, here's what I do when I'm working on the other side of things and how it's helped me navigate through potential issues or conflicts or things like that. So I think that was one of the things that really helped buy a little bit of credibility right at the beginning with the company.
That's a really good point. So obviously, when we're starting out, even though we're still in the same industry, you're starting with the new different stakeholders within your own companies, and you have to build your credibility, within that organization in a smaller group. Maybe Carrie, you can share a little bit about how you built your credibility moving from the end user side to back to the service provider side.
Yeah. Well, it was probably easier for me to meet with the clients and understand them because I understood their roles better than I understood my own role. That was probably the biggest challenge. It was like, I remember being terrified the first couple of client meetings because I'm like, I don't know what it is that we at CBRE do yet. I'm so new, but I do understand what you as a client do, because that was what I did. And so, gaining credibility with the client was probably even easier than gaining credibility with my new colleagues. But having that different perspective of like, hey guys, this is how the client's actually going to think. When we're writing up an RFP response, like, they're not going to read the stuff, on page 75. Like they don't, right? You still have to do a good job on it, but it's being succinct and to the point of what you're trying to do. And I remember having some conversations with people early on, like that was just so surprising, that just the level of detail that service providers typically go to. And then as a client, if you've got 10 RFPs that are coming back, there's no way you're going to read 200 pages times 10. It's unfortunate. I think it was a good lesson for me then, if I were to ever boomerang back, of like how I would be as a client, and the stuff that I would maybe ask for. It might change a little bit, but I think just really having that different perspective from the other side, it definitely makes you a lot more well-rounded, of kind of completing the other side of the picture.
Yeah, absolutely.
I completely agree.
So Brittanie, obviously you were coached based on your podcast, so there was a level of credibility that you came in with. Well, what else did you have to do to continue to build that credibility of the person that reached out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. And in all transparency, prior to coming to American Family Insurance, I've been managing 2 people, and I was coming in to manage seven people who essentially do all the construction for the entire enterprise across the country. So it took me some time to really learn my team and all of that historical knowledge that's here. There was a lot of credibility building with my team, quite honestly, because who was I coming in who knew nothing about all these upwards of 70 plus facilities that they knew all the information about. And so it was one of those things for me to really just understand not only about our spaces, our workplaces, but our processes, understanding the challenges that we have with them, understanding, back to Bill's comment about politics, right? There are just so many people in a large organization like this one that you have to understand the ins and outs, who's who makes the decisions, who needs to have consensus. And when working as a consultant, where there are about 100 plus consultants, maybe closer to 200 now, you don't have the same kind of navigation that you have to go through in order to make decisions internal to that consultancy firm. Yes, you have to work with clients, but it looks totally different from the service provider side, because the time it takes for you to make the recommendation and get the response, there's a lot of conversations that happen internally with education, with convincing, with bringing that backup data. To Benjamin's point, like there's just so much that takes place. And for me, it was a little bit of a shock to understand what the meat of that looked like and how I had to navigate that preparation for all of those meetings that need to take place. So I think it took me some time, quite honestly. But I think at this point now, within 2 years, hopefully, sooner than that, I've gotten a good handle on what people are looking for, because, back to Carrie's point, you have to start thinking of who's your customer, right? Like if you can put yourself in their shoes and start thinking about it from their perspective. That's something that we did very well as consultants. I started thinking about that in every connection that I made, and that really, really helped me. So that's how I built credibility.
It was also frustrating for me coming in about how long those decisions took and navigating through that internal politics, because you just assume that a quick decision can be made, or it's working its way up the chain. And I remember I used to ask clients, can I have feedback on that, like in a week. Like, I don't think it'll take a week, but it'll be, I'll give you a week. And now I just laugh when people ask for that kind of stuff. Because it's like, oh yeah, no, that's not going to happen. We need 3 weeks. And it's different being on that side. It's still a little frustrating sometimes how long it takes, but I get it.
Well, and that building consensus, it's the pre-meetings to the meetings, right? So you have to have all these different meetings with all the people who are going to come to the meeting.
Right.
So like the meeting is everybody saying, yep, we're all on the same page. And so it's just like, you already know what the outcome's going to be, but you've had to do all the socialization. And yet it's kind of exhausting. Like, but it's just how it works, right? And Bill, I laugh, you're exactly right. The time it takes to do all of that it's just like, wow, it is amazing.
I think there's a lot of us nodding heads.
I was just gonna say, it's about reminding sometimes people that, you're an expert in the real estate workplace field, because you've been kind of doing this for a long time now, and bringing that up at the right time with the right people is really helpful. But also that doesn't matter for a lot of people also in the organization, right? It's about what everybody cares most about, what they care about. And it's about understanding when to draw on those types of conversations. So I 100% agree with everything that, everybody else chimed in on and said.
Well, so this is really great. So now I'm going to maybe switch the subject just a little bit. So we decided, you guys decided, we decided that we want to make this change, which is really exciting, new opportunity. Well, we got to go through the breakup, right? So 20 years, I'm going to go back to Ben, 20 years of JLL. It's, how did you handle the change and navigate kind of switching from a long time career to a new environment?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, we can talk about this for a long time, but the short answer is, a lot of it also depends on how you do it. It's relationships. I mean, certainly, there is a school of thought that you burn the bridge, and I certainly don't believe in that school of thought. I mean, the world is very small. I think everybody on this call agrees the real estate world is really, really, really small. You have to be very, very smart about how you engage with people and remain with the relationships with these people, because you're going to see them again. And it's like interesting as I scroll through the list of attendees on this call right now. There are not just my colleagues, but there are former clients, there are former peers. This is a small world. And so, when I moved over to the end user side, fortunately or unfortunately, I think there were many people that saw this as a great opportunity, especially on the provider side. One of the first things that I did when I got to here is we went out to bid for our services, and good or bad, found myself at the last Coronet Summit in Seattle at the time of it. And we had really, really hoped we'd get done with the RFP before we went to Coronet, but I was very popular, very, very popular. Many folks wanted to connect, as you might imagine. And that's still the case, but part of it is not just the opportunity from a pure business standpoint, part of it's also the relationship building. So I think as long as you are managing those relationships, and I know that almost every company in jail is not unique, when you leave, there is a little box in the forever HR file that says, available or eligible for rehire. And there are plenty of people that box is not checked. Where they, when and if you showed up and said, hey, I'd like to go back and work there someday, they're like, yeah, no. And so I'd like to believe that when and if I ever called up jail and said, hey, I'd love to go work there again, the box would be checked, but you have to work pretty hard to make sure that's the case.
Great. Yeah. Does anybody else have any story to share when they informed the old employer that you're going to be making the change? Any tips or any unique experience from the panelists?
Well, I can just add, when I was leaving Capital One to go to CB, the partner at Capital One was JLL, not CB. And so that was interesting. On my going away dinner, all of our JLL leadership team was there, and my boss, the head of our real estate group, he made it kind of uncomfortable for them, because he's like, well, Carrie, if things don't work out with JLL, we know who to call. And they're like, wait, what? And he's like, oh, I'm just kidding. I'm not kidding. No, I'm kidding. So it was just kind of funny. But yeah, I think I love what Ben said just about leaving that open. This is a very small industry and people switch sides all the time. And even in just the 4 years I've been at CB, I have seen people leave and I've seen them come back. And I've seen people that I've known, through Coronet or through the industry come over or make switches between end user and service provider all the time. And I just think that makes us all just more have greater depth of our knowledge base and what we can bring to our careers. I also think it adds a lot of just energy and excitement into your own career, that making a change when you're doing something really different, it forces you into a learning curve, whether you like it or not. And it's going to take probably a good 2 years to really start to feel like, okay, I kind of got the hang of this. And that in itself, I think, is very invigorating. And I really encourage that. Like, I know myself, there are times when sometimes you wish it would just be a little bit more autopilot, because you're like, I'm drinking from the fire hose every day. I'm just really tired of it. I wish it would settle down, but then it will. And it just gives you such greater insight, I think, into whatever you want to do in the future.
It also took me a long time to stop saying we when I was working with JLL. Oh, what do we do? Oh, what are you doing?
There's a lot of ex-we's.
Yeah.
So obviously you guys are all very talented, had a great successful careers, but maybe I think people might be curious how you came about your new opportunity. Bill, maybe we start with you to hear about how you heard about the switch between the architecture side to the end user side.
Yeah, sure. It was a recruiter. Again, like everyone else on this panel, I wasn't necessarily looking to make a change at all, but I mean, obviously I answered the phone and had that conversation, which led to the change. It's something that had been in the back of my mind for a while as a potential opportunity. And like Carrie said, it's a small industry. We all make changes all the time. And I think you just have to go into it with I don't know what's going to happen or where I'm going to end up, but I'm open.
Awesome. Anybody have a different? I know, Carrie, I think you have maybe a plug for.
Yeah, I mean, Coronet, I feel like a little bit of a broken record, and I'm not getting a kickback or something from Coronet Global on this, but I really do believe in the organization. And, I think I remember a class in my MBA studies where it was all about social networks, and it was like an emphasis on it's important to build and be purposeful about building networks, especially early on in your career. And I remember one of my classmates, she worked for Chicago Mercantile Exchange, and her boss was the former chairman. So we got an hour of this guy's time, and it was phenomenal. And that was one of the things he said. He's like, get involved, get in committees, be on different panels, just get involved, because as you get to know people, then you'll start to all graduate into all these, high level positions. And all of a sudden, this person who used to sit next to you now is the head of real estate at this, or the CFO of this company. And it just kind of organically happens. And I can say now, all these years, that has happened. And that's been exciting to when you've rolled up your sleeves next to someone because you've been working on some committee thing, they get to know who you are as a person, and then they can vouch for you in ways that's different than, oh, there's a random person, our profiles match on LinkedIn, but I actually don't know you from Adam. I think LinkedIn has a great purpose, but I think a stronger connection is one where you actually have some experience with a human being on a personal level and can really vouch for their character.
That's true.
Yeah, those are such great points, Carrie. And I mentioned I have the podcast, but thankfully that's not what allows me to do my work today, because right to your point, building relationships and networking, that's not the crux of the kind of work that we do when we're in the field of real estate or workplace. I mean, there's so much depth to to what we do on a day-to-day basis. So thankfully, I mean, to your point, Carrie, I believe that, you know, just looking at some of the attendees on the call, I've been able to establish that good relationship with many people in the immediate market, the Midwestern market, and that has carried through and really shown that obviously there's an interest in kind of elevating and advancing our industry. Because there's so much that we can do still yet, even in light of the pandemic, to be more efficient, to save money, to plan a little bit better, and to have those conversations as early as possible. So, you know, in terms of how was I found, I think I shared that story a little bit earlier. I'm not going to rehash that too much, but LinkedIn is a great tool. And I think because I have been using it so much, particularly for networking, I felt very comfortable hopping on a phone call with anybody, just because, you know, you just never know what kind of relationship you're going to build. I have tons of friends that I've built simply by reaching out on LinkedIn. So.
And then just my story real quick. I mean, you know, I always feel bad when I talk to younger people and they're like, oh God, you know, tell me about your career and what'd you do? And, you know, all the great things that happened in my life all just happened, just people calling me up, you know, not me being the go-getter and knocking down doors. You know, my wife called me up and asked me out, and been married 22 years, and, you know, JLL called me and here called me. But, you know, when I had agreed to do something else, I'd actually shaken hands with somebody to go do a very different job than I'm doing today. And got a call from a recruiter at here, you know, when I was kind of negotiating paperwork to do this other thing. And it wasn't on the end user side, it was on the provider side. And, you know, where I thought I'd just make the rest of my career. But somebody knew somebody, you know, the hiring manager at here, you know, knew somebody, ironically at JLL, you know, who, you know, said, hey, do you know anybody that might be good for the position? He goes, well, you can give this guy a call. I don't know if he'd be interested in coming to the end user side, but. And again, just, you know, you take the call, you have the conversation, you don't necessarily know where it's going to go, but that's okay. You know, as long as the interesting, you know, the industry is interesting, as long as the opportunity is interesting, it's worth the conversation. And so I think it's a lot of it, you know, and the advice to, you know, to everybody listening is, you know, just be open to it, right? You may not know where it's going to come from. You may not expect it. It may be something very different than you had in your mind. But every opportunity is unique, and there might be some really interesting things about it that are worth listening to, because you never know.
Yeah, great points. So we have about 10 minutes, I think, and I have a couple questions that are really interesting, and I'd love to hear from all four of you. What is one thing unexpected you learned on the other side? So we'll start maybe back with Bill.
Oh man, I wish I weren't going first. There's a lot.
Sorry. You gotta pick one.
No problem. One of the most unexpected things that I learned was how many different business units I'd be supporting. Like, I knew it was a large organization, but I didn't realize how many different actual users and types of users there were within the company that I was going to have to help support. And I think one of the learnings from that is that one size can't fit all. And even though I didn't go in with that mindset at all, that had been the previous assumption of the organization. And I think trying to right size that now as a part of my job is hard to untangle from that. But I wish I had known just how many different people I was going to be interacting with and solving problems for, because of course, every single business unit thinks that they're unique and special. And they are in some respects, but I didn't know that ahead of time.
Absolutely. Loud and clear. I agree with that. Brittanie?
Yeah, as Bill was talking, I said, yeah, I think that was definitely a shocker for me too. But what first came to mind for me was that I was going to get an office. That was a shock to me. My director sent me a picture prior to me my start date of my office, and I said, what do I need that for? Because I knew there were going to be a lot of people that I would be meeting with on a regular basis. And quite honestly, I had been so used to just running around from project to project to project. And not sitting at a desk, period. I would be in clients' offices all the time. And so for me, just having an office was mind blowing. So I actually changed it into like a team meeting room because I was like, yeah, I don't want that. But that was a shock to me because, you know, there are organizations who are in the mindset of transitioning, and there are many organizations who have transitioned from that kind of, well, there's a need for office, or, you know, activity-based work is definitely a transitioning mindset now too. And I think many of us are thinking of that a little bit more broadly, simply because of the way we're working today. But that was something new that I hadn't even considered. So that was a shock to me.
Brittany, I turned my office into a team space as well. Same.
Well, the synergies.
That's funny. Kind of on that, I was used to at Capital One. It was very activity-based work. They are on very much the forefront of how office space is set up. And so when I came to CB and had the opportunity then to see lots of different clients and how they work, I was kind of shocked how many companies are still not in that are in the hard wall offices and the tall cubes. I thought that was already done. I'd kind of forgotten because I'd been so inundated and very forward leaning design and construction. I kind of forgotten that still existed. So that was kind of unexpected. Just being around that different mindset again, not so much from a CB perspective, but just exposure to those different clients. But I think for me, that one of the biggest things is how much I enjoyed the variety of every meeting I would be on is a different client with a different problem that you're solving for. And it's really interesting work that I really loved seeing into lots of different companies in such a short time.
And just to chime in, you know, for me, something I knew, but, you know, until you're actually living it, it's very, very different is, you know, I went from being a real estate person at a real estate firm, you know, to being the real estate guy at a technology firm. You know, I'm the dumbest guy in the company by far, right? I mean, I go to these meetings with brilliant people with PhDs and, you know, master's degrees in computer science, and I'm just a dumb real estate guy. And so the reality is, you know, knowing that, you know, going from being revenue generating to being a support function, you know, every dollar, every euro we spend on real estate, we can't spend on marketing or people or R&D or whatever. And so, you know, I need to be able to look really, really senior people in the eye and say, look, we got to do this. This is incredibly important for the operation of our business, but we're not the dog, we're the tail. And so that, again, I knew that was the case, but to actually see it and live it is a big change.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
That's a great point. And Ben, I would say it's the opposite for me, right? So it was so refreshing.
Now you're the smartest person in the room, which is good. I envy you.
No, not that part, but just, you know, walking through the halls of the office and realizing everyone here is doing something real estate related. It was really cool to be around that because I was used to being the support function. So. Well,
and our curse, right? Everybody knows real estate because they own a house, so they can do our job. I can't code, yes, but they can do my job.
Absolutely.
That's true. And I think for my end, I think so. We touched on a different topic before, but it's just it seemed easier from being on the provider side how the decisions are made in the client side. I did not expect the meetings and the pre-meetings and the slides and the presentations and internal stakeholders, just how much I had to navigate to get to that decision back to the provider. So that's definitely a big lesson learned, unexpected thing for me. So we have time for one more question. We're going to kind of go to the reverse side, and I'm going to go in the reverse order. What do you miss about the other side? And we're going to start now with Ben.
I think, you know, very much what Carrie said resonates with me. And it's actually one of the reasons I ultimately turned down, you know, A.T. Kearney and Anderson, you know, and went to JLL or LaSalle Partners was, you know, the idea of working with lots of different clients was very attractive to me. I don't regret where I am right now. I like very much that I get to focus on one particular company, but that was fun. I worked with, you know, technology companies and financial companies and manufacturing companies and big pharma and, you know, international, I mean, all that variety. it's funny, we had a conversation that one of my clients 1,000 years ago said, one thing you can't do is you can't forward me an email where the subject heading is the name of our company. Everything I do is my company. You need to change the name to a location or a certain project, but you can't just say like company XYZ, because that helps me not at all. I'm trying to file things away. And of course, as a provider, it didn't make any sense. I'm working on your client. This is the only deal I'm working on right now. But for them, like, look, this is my whole world. So that kind of perspective was incredibly valuable.
That's true. Yeah, that's a good point. Carrie?
Yeah, I would say, in the role I have now, it's very much about relationship building. The output of my work would be a contract, which is just like basically a PDF, right? I miss construction. I miss something tangible that because of the work you do, you can walk through it, you can touch it, you can see it, you can feel it. I miss that aspect of it. Of course, that's not all the roles on an end user, of course, but I'd say the construction aspect of the end of my former role is something I really miss.
Brittanie?
Yeah, I sympathize and empathize with what Ben and Carrie has said thus far, but having worked for a very small consulting firm, I had been doing kind of wearing many hats outside of just project management proper, and even managing individuals. I've been chasing work as well. And I think there's something to the drive that you have to have, and also the excitement when you get a win. That's not something that you get when you're working internally, not quite the same. And it's not that sense of newness anymore. Like, I'm going to work with this client, haven't worked with them before. I do miss pitching. I think that idea of just pitching this, brand new, really cool approach to conducting your project, that was fun to me. If anything I missed, that's it. Yeah.
All right, Bill, last.
I think for me, coming from the design side, I miss being in control of the design decisions and ideas. Like, even though ultimately I can say, yes, I like this, no, I don't like this, I'm not the one anymore who's coming up with those ideas and pitching them. And so it feels like I've lost some control, even though that's not necessarily the case, but it's a different way to work than I had before. And I do miss some of that.
That's a fair point. Yeah. Well, I want to make sure that we have some time to answer some questions. So thank you again, panelists. I'm going to turn it over to Heather.
Yeah, we just want to make sure we open it up for questions. I don't see any in the chat yet, but feel free to unmute yourself if you do have any specific questions. I'm going to pause there and allow us some awkward silence. All right, one from Chris Cole. Thank you, Chris. To the panelists, and anyone can really take this question. Did you get a bump up in your PTO amount in the change? Great question.
Lost.
I can go first. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Bill.
I was just going to say I lost. Although that being said, sorry to interrupt. I was going to say, that being said, moving over to this side of things, I have a lot less overtime than I used to. So I mean, it's all kind of made up, I think.
I was just going to say, we have DTO. So in theory, I have unlimited time off, but we're all big boys and girls. We got to get our work done. But the one point I was going to make is that when I left JLL and before I started here, I took a break. I took a mid-career break, for 4 months. And it was spectacular. Oh. Took my kids to school in the morning, played tennis with my wife at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday because I could, and was networking and looking and meeting people and things like that. And that was great. But that was, if you have an opportunity to do that, it's gold, because you forget that after you kind of graduate college, like your summer is just a hotter time to work. You don't really get breaks like we used to get. It's if you can find a way to do it, it's absolutely worth it.
Yeah, and I would say I increased theoretically because we have unlimited vacation, but I actually wish that we didn't, because people don't really take it. It's fake vacation because you're basically on call, you know? So yeah, that's a tough one.
Yeah, there's a question on the list that we didn't get to. Somebody was asking how can I maintain my podcast? Fortunately, I have been able to just be super transparent about when I want to be creating content, and thankfully as well, we have a flexible schedule here at American Family Insurance, where most of us kind of take every other Friday off at the current moment. And so as a result, the amount of flexibility I've had, it's not quote unquote PTO, but it's definitely increased now that I've been working at American Family.
Thank you, Brittanie, for catching that. One other question from John Wickman. What is one thing you would tell your younger self?
Besides, like, buy Amazon stock or?
Tesla or Bitcoin?
Yeah.
I would say just take bigger risks and jump sooner. So Wickman is the guy who was that person that said, hey, Capital One's looking for someone experienced. So I'm glad that he had that conversation with me. And I resonate with what Bennett said is, you know, the things came to me. I didn't really go out and do it. I probably should have. And I think that just having lots of different experiences, I know I get so much out of them. So I'm like, I wish I would have maybe done that earlier in my career, but at the same time, I was enjoying what I was doing. So, but I think just being open to taking that risk and not being afraid of what's it going to be like that first day of school, you know, who am I going to eat lunch with? How's this going to work? But just being confident that you're going to be okay. And it's going to be a little rough, maybe at the beginning, but it's going to be totally worth it ultimately.
And then I have one more. Oh, go ahead, Brittanie.
I was just going to say, to piggyback off of that, don't be afraid to put your opinions online. That was something I was actually really afraid of prior to starting my podcast. I was fearful magnanimously about it. And I recognized that when you share, whether it be in a panel like this, when you just share your opinion, people get a better sense of who you are and how you operate. And it just takes down that, you know, brick wall that sometimes you run up against when you're trying to network, or when people really just want a sense of who you are. So, I mean, that alone does open up a lot of opportunities just for conversations. So I would recommend that to anybody. Totally recommend that to my younger self.
Awesome. And then just one of you, I want you to jump in. I've got an anonymous question here. Do you find more career growth opportunities within the corporate role or within the service provider role? Who wants to tackle that one?
Part of it, I think, depends on where you are in your career, right? I mean, I'm glad that I did what I did at Jill when I did it, you know, including, as I mentioned earlier, I relocated with the company. I mean, I don't know if I would have been able to do that as easily today with my, you know, relatively young children. You know, there were opportunities that were easier for me to take advantage of at the time. So I don't know if there's an easy answer one way or the other. I think part of it depends on sort of where you are and who you are, but presumably there are opportunities everywhere you look.
Some things, fun.
I would say, I think on the corporate side, as an end user, there's only so many positions. So the real estate organizations are typically pretty flat and thin. And so it's hard to grow your career just in one company. So, you know, I reported to the head of real estate for Capital One. So the next role would have been his role, and he wasn't going anywhere. And, you know, and I was still too junior to take over that. And so going to the service provider side, there's a lot more variety, and it's not so much of like step up the ladder. It's more of, there's a lot of different kind of lateral things you can do that maybe incrementally just add to your overall toolkit of your experiences. So it's more of a bigger playing field, if you will. I think on the service provider side, just because the whole topic is real estate, and there's lots of different areas you can dabble in that area while staying with the same firm if you so choose.
Excellent. So what we're going to do in the last 3 minutes, we only have 3 minutes, is to do some rapid fires. And I told the panelists we were going to do this. They haven't been prepped. So away we go, and I'll just call on you, one-word answers. If you had to start your career all over again, would you start with the end user side or the service provider side first? Ben?
Service provider.
Carrie?
End user.
Brittany?
Service provider.
Bill?
Service provider.
And Hannah.
Service provider.
All right. If you had to choose between more energy or more time in life, what would you choose? Same order. Ben?
I have young kids, energy.
Carrie?
Energy.
Brittany?
Energy.
Bill?
I'll say time just to mix it up.
Hannah?
I'm gonna bring it back to energy.
I would take time with you, Bill. One word, how would you describe your leadership style? Ben?
Humor.
Carrie?
Teamwork.
Brittany?
Collaborative.
Bill?
Empathy.
Awesome. And Hannah?
I also say collaboration.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. 2 soft skills that are going to be required post-pandemic. Bill?
Oh, good question. They have to be one-word answers.
I'll let you cheat a little bit. It's
All
fine.
right. No, I'll say empathy again and time management.
Hannah?
I think empathy for sure. And I guess flexibility.
How about you, Brittany?
Can you ask the question one more time, Heather?
2 soft skills that are going to be key post-pandemic.
Oh, yeah. Empathy all the way.
Hard.
Negotiation.
Love it. Carrie?
Yeah.
I would say flexibility, and then having to put an entire outfit together. That's not just
How about you, Ben? That's a great one.
Empathy for sure, but also, balance as it relates to empathy and also good bandwidth. That's helpful.
Excellent. Got one more to round us out here, giving a nod to the work from anywhere world. And I didn't say hybrid, even though I just said it, because I know we're kind of exhausted with that. Would you rather work from the beach or would you rather work from the mountain? Ben?
Mountain, because sand and computers aren't good together.
How about you, Carrie?
beach.
Hannah?
Mountain, I can only stand on the beach for so many days.
Brittany?
Beach.
And Bill?
Beach, as long as there's an umbrella.
Great. Well, thank you so much, panelists. This was a great time. Really appreciate your insights. And for all of those of you on the call right now, please check out CoreNet Chicago's website for our upcoming events. Everyone have a most excellent day, and thank you again.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so
Thank you.
much. Appreciate it. Thanks, Heather.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Panels, it was really nice talking with you guys. Enjoyed it.
It was great.
This was
You too.
fun. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank
Do
you.
it again.
Bye. Sounds good.